Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Tanya.
I'm Josh.
And today is Josh's turn to tell us a gruesome tale.
Yes,
that's what we do.
We love a twisted talk.
We do.
So, without further ado, this week I am covering the case of Bible John. Now, this killer is believed to be responsible for the murders of 3 women between 1968 and 1969 in Glasgow, Scotland. So, let's get into it and do a bit of our intro first.
Not nice. Not nice. Take it back.
But, it's near Ireland.
It's near Ireland. I was just trying to think, was I in Glasgow?
It's slightly more local.
I think I was. But anyway, continue.
Glasgow. So, the victims were all young brunette women between the ages of 25 and 32.
Fuck, I'm glad I wasn't alive then.
Neither were they.
Joshua.
But I mean, by the end of it.
Yep. Continue.
Sorry, that was bad.
That was in poor taste.
That was. My taste has never been
great.
Anyway,
he liked women of my description.
Look at some of my ex.
And in my age range.
Anywho.
But let's not get onto that.
Let's not. That's a whole nother podcast episode.
If we ever make a Patreon.
Yeah, that's like a private chat made public on Patreon for the low price of $11.99 a month. No, I'm joking, we don't have one yet.
We don't have a Patreon. I don't think we'll be charging that much.
Hey, think big.
Okay, right, well, I'll leave it up to you. You're the technical guru. But continue telling me about Bible John, please.
Anywho.
I would like to get home to
So, all of the women met the killer at the Barrowland Ballroom, a dance hall and music venue in Glasgow City. The killer has never been identified, and the case is still unsolved and remains one of the most extensive manhunts in Scottish criminal history. Ooh. So yeah, it's been a long time. What's that? 31 years until 2000. That's like over 50 years anyway.
You could have just asked me. My dad was born in 1970. He's 52, so it's been 53 or 54 years.
Yeah.
There you go.
But anywho, it's been X amount of time.
I like how I assumed you would know what year my dad was born.
Yeah, I know what year my mum was born, but that was the late 70s.
Yeah, my dad was 1970. The beginning of 1970.
Bang on. This case came to be the first time in Scotland that the Crown Office authorised the publication of a composite drawing or composite sketch of an individual suspected of murder.
That's very interesting.
So, little interesting, I suppose you could almost consider that history fact, or criminal history fact.
There we go. Twisted Talks with a bit of history.
This case... Oh yeah, I just said that. The killer became known as Bible John because he repeatedly quoted the Bible and condemned any form of adultery when he was in the company of his final victim, because apparently that's normal things to throw out there at a dance hall.
Yep.
Now, convicted serial killer and rapist Peter Tobin was speculated to have been Bible John due to his known movements in MO after his conviction for 3 murders in the late 2000s. Police later eliminated him as a suspect, but we'll get more into him later. We're going to move straight on into the murders. So, on the 23rd of February 1968, the naked body of 25-year-old Patricia Docker, an auxiliary nurse, which I believe is also known as a healthcare assistant, was found in the doorway of a lock-up garage at, I nearly said garage, I was feeling American, at Carmichael Place, Battlefield, Glasgow. The discovery of Patricia's body was made by a man who was on his way to work. Now, the location of her body was only yards away from Langside Place, which is where she lived. Patricia's body showed evidence of substantial blunt force trauma, especially to the face and head. She'd been strangled to death, possibly with a belt. Patricia's handbag, watch and clothes were missing from the scene of the crime. Her handbag was later recovered from the River Cart by an underwater search team, and her watch was recovered from a pool of water near the murder scene. However, her clothes were never found.
Okay, so that's why you kept it as a souvenir.
Seems that way.
Okay.
Now, extensive door-to-door inquiries were carried out in the area and resulted in a witness who did recall hearing a woman scream, "Leave me alone," the evening before. Now, there wasn't really any hard evidence at the crime scene. An ambulance man, though, who had retrieved the body, informed the investigators that the victim was a nurse who worked at Mearnskirk Hospital in nearby Renfrewshire. I don't know if I pronounced that hospital name right, but whatever. The information, I don't know how else you'd say it. The information led to the victim being formally identified by her father the following day.
It always makes me, sorry to interrupt, but it always makes me so sad to think
Family
that,
have to just go in and see that.
like, that's the last memory they're going to have of their loved one.
And it's like going in and not knowing for sure whether it's them or not. Like, it's not like it's at the funeral home with an open casket. And I don't think everywhere does that. It's more of that's a big Irish thing, an open casket is, I think.
I remember obviously we've had a lot of deaths in particularly my dad's side of the family. So, like, I've been going to funerals since I was, like, 9. And there was deaths in the family before that, but I wasn't allowed to go to the funerals because I was too young.
Probably same, like.
But... like, it wasn't my first open casket. I didn't really take much notice. Second one was fine. It wasn't until I was like 18 and I went to my cousin Michael's funeral. I remember we were going into the funeral home, and the funeral home here in town, you go in and then you go around the corner and the coffin is around the corner.
Are we on about the newer place?
The older place.
Or the older? Okay.
Not the chapel, the old place. And I remember I went in and I just, like, my body just stopped because I couldn't face seeing him in the coffin. And I don't know, was it because before that everyone else that had passed away had been kind of elderly? Michael was very young.
It was a big difference in circumstance.
Yeah, but that was quite difficult for me.
And I think as well, by that age, it's more of an age to have much more of an awareness of what's going on.
Honestly, I'm the type of person...
when you're younger, you're just kind of going with the flow, doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I've noticed I am the kind of person that, like, the death doesn't actually hit me until I see the open casket.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh my god, they're gone, like.
Whereas I'm like that in the sense that, like, it still doesn't properly hit me when I see the casket. It's when they're putting the lid on for me.
Well, that too, but like
or the lowering,
the
if I
tears,
managed.
like the heartbroken, like the sobs don't come until the coffin's going into the ground.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's just, I guess everyone processes it.
Yeah, like if, for example, like for me, like with like, I don't know, was I there? But anyway, with deaths that I've seen, like, it's kind of a case of if I've been close enough to the person where I've been there when they pull back the curtain and put the lid on the coffin, that's when I start crying, because I'm like, and then it's like, okay, this is literally, the door is being put on, that's it. No more seeing them alive or dead.
When I was at...
but if I don't see that part, then it doesn't happen until the lowering of the coffin.
When I was at Pat's funeral, I literally... Well, it was the first cremation I'd been to, so it wasn't...
I've only been to one.
I was kind of teary in the church, and then we got to the crematorium, and I was kind of okay. And then his sister got up and gave a beautiful eulogy, and I was gone. And then I stopped, and then my aunt got up and gave a eulogy, and I was gone again. And then they closed the curtains, and they played some of his favourite songs, and I could not stop crying. Like, I had to leave. I
remember one of the manhunts for a funeral with me that's made me cry in terms of, like, eulogy or songs or whatever. And, like, it's also, it's a little bit like, it's not funny, but it's a little bit funny in hindsight in the sense of the dramatics of it.
Go on.
So it was my granduncle and I remember it was in England, and when the coffin was being, when they, like, everyone starts to lift it up to bring it out of the church. What song did they play?
Oh god.
What's that fella? Time to Say Goodbye. He's really... Bocelli.
Oh, Peter Bocelli?
No, Andrea Bocelli.
Andrea Bocelli.
It's time to...
I don't think I know that one.
Oh, you definitely do.
They played Tomorrow at Pat's funeral.
Who's that by?
Oh,
what a song!
Tomorrow. I can't listen to that song anymore. I honestly can't. It makes me bawl. And then there was like a real old-timey song, and it was I couldn't tell you who sings it, I couldn't tell you the lyrics, I couldn't tell you the name of it, but it was about, like, something. It was about a couple, and I couldn't stop looking at my nana, and every time I looked at my nana I was roaring crying. But yeah, so there you go.
This one.
I know it.
Yeah. Can you see now?
Turn it off.
Yeah!
I'm going to cry.
But, like, in hindsight, you have to have a little chuckle at the fact of, like, the dramatics of it, but it was obviously a song they all loved, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, like, there is that sentimentality to it, and it is a beautiful song.
Oh, like, I do think it's lovely.
But that I was like...
Yeah, I do think it's lovely the way, like, a person's favourite song or favourite songs are played as the coffin is lowered.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't listen to Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine, for, I'd say, a good 2 years after Leon's funeral.
Yeah.
Without crying. Anytime it came on the radio, it was just instant.
I was like that with Panic at the Disco songs.
Oh, this is gospel. Oh,
yeah.
Broke my heart. But, like, yeah. So, yeah, in conclusion, me and Josh have been to way too many funerals for a couple of 25-year-olds, but we moved.
Just to clarify, we're not a couple. We're just a couple of 25-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. I said a pair of 25-year-olds, didn't I? Or did I say a couple of 25-year-olds?
I don't know, either way.
Anyway, yeah.
We're not paired,
I
nor
don't
coupled.
have I don't have the tool that he desires.
No. No, sad times.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, moving back onto murder. So, Patricia was married but estranged from her husband, and she had one child. On the night of her murder, she had told her parents she would spend the evening dancing at the Majestic Ballroom in Hope Street, but for reasons not known, she had chose to spend most of the evening at the Barrowland Ballroom. Now, in saying reasons not known, it's assumed and likely due to the over 25s night that the venue hosted every Thursday, so that probably appealed to her. Mm-hmm. When Patricia did not come home that evening, as most people, I suppose, you wouldn't assume the worst, especially when they're
but
out.
you would be concerned.
Her parents assumed that maybe she'd stayed with a friend.
Yeah. Well, yeah, natural assumption. She's a grown woman.
She's allowed to do her thing and stay out for a while.
It's not like they're sitting at home waiting on their teenager to come home.
Yeah, exactly. So you might not straight away go to the panic.
She's been married. She has a child herself. Like, she's an adult.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have much reason to be
panicking too
concerned.
much until, let's say, in this case, the next day.
So,
So police inquiries would only determine, it actually was days later by the time the police inquiries determined that in the late evening Patricia had left the Majestic Ballroom to go to the Barrowland. Mm-hmm. So for a few days they didn't know that she'd actually changed dance venue.
They thought she just stayed at the Majestic
Exactly.
Ballroom.
So I suppose that kind of delayed things a bit in terms of investigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Patricia's post-mortem was done by Gilbert Forbes at the University of Glasgow Medical School.
I still think Gilbert is such a shit name.
I'm not the biggest fan of it. Sorry if there's any Gilberts listening.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but...
I'm calling you Bert.
Yeah. No.
And the post-mortem confirmed that the cause of death was strangulation and that Patricia's body showed no clear evidence of sexual assault. So it's not necessarily ruled out, but there's no clear evidence either.
They couldn't definitively say.
Yeah. So the stage of rigor mortis at the time of her discovery indicated that Patricia had likely died not long after she left the Barrowland Ballroom. Mm-hmm. Investigators suspect that the killer likely grabbed Patricia before repeatedly punching her and kicking her in the face as she screamed twice, "Leave me alone." Mm-hmm. And he then went on to rape her before strangling her to death, leaving her naked body there with nothing but a shoe nearby, close to the doorway of the lock-up garage and Carmichael Place. So again, obviously the rape thing is speculation.
Kind of
not like it's anything. Yeah, exactly. It's very likely but not definitive due to the post-mortem, I suppose, being inconclusive on sexual assault.
Unable to, as I love the word definitively apparently, but unable to definitively say
I love
there
that
was
word too for some
sexual assault.
reason. Then moving on to around a year and a half later, on Saturday the 16th of August 1969, I love this name, Jemima MacDonald, a 32-year-old mother of three, also decided to spend her evening dancing at the Barrowland Ballroom. Now, Jemima regularly attended the Barrowland, and her sister Margaret O'Brien would take care of her three children while she was out. It was nearing midnight, and Jemima was seen by multiple people with a young, well-dressed and well-spoken man of a slim build, between the age of 25 and 35, and between 6 foot and 6'2" in height. The man was described to have had short, dark brown hair with fair streaks, likely spoke with a Glaswegian accent, and occasionally added brief biblical quotations into his conversation. Now, I know it was 1969, but someone starts throwing biblical quotations into my conversation and I'm like, get away.
Jesus guy preaching outside work the other day. I was doing the collection.
I'd literally be like, look, I'm too far gone for Jesus. Go
No,
away.
I was inside in the building. He couldn't get near me, but I was doing the collection and I saw this, like, it was like a horse trailer. Obviously being towed by a car, but like it was covered over with like kind of fabric they use on shipping containers.
Okay.
And it just had a lot of Jesus quotes on it. And I remember rolling my eyes, and then one of the girls came in and was like, oh, I was just on my lunch break, and there was a guy preaching outside the church, and I really thought that they were going to get in my car. I was like, oh no.
preach from afar.
Please.
So, Jemima was seen leaving the Barrowland not long after midnight on the 17th of August in the company of this man. And she was last seen walking towards either Main Street or Landrecy Street in the direction of her home, and that was at around 12:40am.
Okay.
Now, Margaret, Jemima's sister, was concerned when Jemima did not return home, obviously, because she's got 3 kids at home. It's her sister minding them,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you charging your vape off your headphones?
No, off my laptop.
Oh, that's impressive.
It died a minute ago and I was not okay.
I'm very impressed. Anyway, so her sister was at home minding the kids and she was concerned.
Yeah, because obviously Jemima didn't return home.
Mm-hmm.
So later that day, now it says day, but obviously that was the early morning hours, so late at night, but it's still considered,
Yeah.
So later that day, Margaret had heard rumours that young children had been seen leaving a derelict tenement building in McKeith Street, talking about there being a body in the premises. So not great.
Not great.
Now, by the Monday morning, still no sign of Jemima, Margaret was obviously so worried that she herself walked down and into that old building where she discovered her sister's severely battered body lying face down with her shoes and stockings lying beside her.
That's awful.
Even,
I know they're only kids, but, go to the guards. Well, the police.
Yeah, but...
Bad Waynes.
Yeah.
Bad Waynes.
Anywho, Jemima's post-mortem concluded that she had been raped and extensively beaten, especially, again, in the face, like the prior victim, and also, like the prior victim, strangled to death, but this time with one of her own stockings.
Oh, gosh.
Jemima had been murdered about 30 hours before the body had been found. Jemima's body was fully clothed, unlike Patricia, the previous victim. However, her underwear had been torn, and like Patricia, Jemima was actually menstruating at the time of her death. Now, that wasn't mentioned in my previous thing, but Patricia was also menstruating at the time of her murder as well.
Interesting.
So, very strange connection between them there and that.
There wouldn't necessarily have been a way for the murderer to know that, so I'm thinking maybe that was just luck. Unless now he had a route through the purses or something and saw pads or tampons or something.
Yeah, that's what you'd think.
Because I feel like in the 60s, I'm very open when I've got my period. I'll tell the whole house. I'll tell the whole town if I need to. But back then, I feel like...
It was more taboo.
It was more taboo, yeah.
Now, police inquiries into the movements of Jemima on the night of her murder led to several eyewitnesses who were able to accurately describe the man that Jemima had been with at the Barrowland. Door-to-door inquiries on McKeith Street also led to a woman who remembered hearing a woman's screams on the evening of Jemima's murder. However, this witness could not remember the precise time. Therefore, the police thought of this information to be little use to their investigation. Because, he was just hearing something, not knowing what time.
Yeah, exactly.
Very likely, probably linked.
Yeah.
So then, obviously, we move on to the initial investigation. So Glasgow City Police obviously noticed several similarities between the murders of Patricia Docker and Jemima MacDonald. Both women had been murdered after attending the Barrowland Ballroom. Both had been beaten before being strangled to death with a ligature, and both women were menstruating. They'd both had their handbags taken from the crime scene. However, initially the murders were not considered to be the work of the same killer. I'm not really sure why, because they literally textbook sound the same.
Yeah.
Now, even though extensive public appeals were made, the investigation into the murder of Patricia Docker unfortunately quickly became a cold case. The police had little information due to lack of witnesses and a lack of hard evidence. The investigation was also hindered by investigators not discovering that Patricia Docker had attended the Barrowland on the evening of her murder until 3 days after the murder. And then obviously a year and a half later, after the discovery of Jemima MacDonald's body, police noted the similarities it had to the murder of Patricia Docker. Police did not conclusively link both murders to the same killer, but they could not completely rule the theory out either.
Okay.
As well as this, police were certain that the killer or killers were very knowledgeable of the local area. However, they still could have been a stranger to the area, as none of the eyewitnesses the investigator spoke to knew the man or men seen with either of the women prior to their murders.
Okay.
Now, as mentioned earlier, for the first time in a Scottish murder hunt, a composite drawing of the man that Jemima MacDonald had last been seen alive with was given to the press. The composite drawing was widely distributed through both the newspapers and on television throughout Scotland in an attempt to identify the suspect. As well as this, male and female undercover police officers undertook discreet surveillance at the Barrowland Ballroom in efforts to identify the suspect. However, the police surveillance at the Barrowland Ballroom ceased in late October 1969 due to it failing to produce any suspects. And business owners also blamed detectives at the time for a sharp drop in attendance figures because people totally stopped going because of the police, not to do with people being murdered.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
It's probably
both, but like finding the murderer is a bit more of a priority than your business, love.
I don't know. Is it? I don't know, but like I feel like you can always spot an undercover guard.
I feel like that'd be easier nowadays than back then, though.
Yeah, true.
Now then, moving on again to the next murder. On the 31st of October 1969, the body of 29-year-old Helen Puttock was found behind a tenement in the Scotstoun district of Glasgow by a man out walking his dog. Her body was beside a drain pipe in the back garden of her Earl Street flat. Helen had been stripped partially naked, severely beaten around the face before being raped, and then strangled to death with again one of her own stockings, just like with Jemima.
In her back garden.
In her back garden as well. Like they were all so close to home, every single one of them. Oh. They were all only yards away from their house, all three of them.
It's like Rained Murray, like she was like
practically
so
home.
Close to home.
Yeah. Now, the contents of Helen's handbag had been scattered close to her body, but the handbag itself was missing from the crime scene. Grass and weed stains on the soles of her feet indicated that she had engaged in a violent struggle with her killer. It was evident that at one point she attempted to scale a nearby railway embankment. Her body also had a deep bite mark on her upper right thigh. Oof. And, like with Patricia Docker and Jemima MacDonald, Helen was menstruating at the time of her murder.
Okay, so now I'm like, how is he figuring out they're on their periods? How is he figuring out that they are on their periods?
Helen's murderer had placed her sanitary towel beneath her left arm. Yeah. Now, the evening before her murder, Helen and her sister, Jean Langford, had been to the Barrowland Ballroom, where both had become acquainted with two men, both named John. One of these men had said he worked as a slater and lived in Castlemilk, while the other man had been a well-spoken man who did not say where he actually lived. After being with these two men for more than an hour, Helen, Jean and the two men left the Barrowland to head home. The man named John, who had been Jean's dance partner, walked to George Square to get a bus, while Jean, Helen and the man who had been Helen's dance partner got a taxi. The trio set off from Glasgow Cross, making a 20-minute journey west toward Jean's Knightswood home. During the trio's conversation in the taxi, most of the key information relating to the killer's psychological profile became clear. The taxi arrived at Jean's house and, she exited, leaving Helen and her dance partner still in the taxi. So Helen's dance partner. Yep. The taxi then continued towards Helen's house in Scotstoun. Jean later told detectives that Helen's companion had been a teetotal individual, meaning he did not drink alcohol.
Oh, teetotal?
Teetotal, sorry, yeah. Meaning he did not drink alcohol, and he repeatedly quoted the Old Testament stories of Moses during the time she and her sister had talked with him in the taxi, as you do.
I'm sorry, I know it's the 60s, it's different times.
People were more religious, but I still wouldn't be something...
I also just think, well, maybe it's just because I'm not religious myself. Like, if I met a fella and he was persistently quoting the Bible, he wouldn't get any more than half a quote out and I'd be gone.
Do you know what I mean? And I know back then majority of people probably were religious to some extent, but still, like, it's especially your first time with someone, would you not be focusing on talking about other things?
Yeah, not like, I don't know,
not being a preacher.
Strange. Maybe he was a preacher.
Who knows? Let's see. Oh yeah. So Old Testament stories of Moses during the time she and her sister had talked with him in the taxi. Yeah. The man had also referred to the Barrowland as an adulterous den of iniquity. Okay. And of his disapproval of married women visiting the premises as the four had gotten their coats at the end of the evening. Okay,
what's it got to do with you? Mr. John?
Now, then, moving on a bit, Helen Puttock's sister, Jean Langford, described the suspect as being a tall, slim and well-dressed young man with reddish or fair hair, rounded neatly at the back, aged between 25 and 30, being around 5 foot 10 inches in height. The man had given his name as either John Templeton, John Sempleson or John Emerson, and he had been a polite, well-spoken man. And again, as I was quoting the Old Testament during the ride home, he had also indicated that he was neither Catholic nor Protestant. Jean said that it had become clear to her during the taxi ride that the man had considered her presence to be an inconvenience. At one stage of the taxi ride, he had explained that the reason he did not drink alcohol was because of being conditioned by a strict parental attitude. So, I guess his parents didn't like alcohol, or one of them. The man also mentioned his father's belief that dance halls were dens of iniquity, with any married women who frequented them being adulterous by nature.
Okay, so he's clearly got some parental issues, maybe with both parents. I'm thinking maybe his parents were quite religious.
Something's not right anyway.
Yeah. Strange.
Yeah, to say the least. Jean told detectives that the man with Helen had been dressed in a well-cut brown Reed and Taylor brand suit and that he smoked Embassy cigarettes. Ooh. She also said that the man had mentioned he was familiar with several drinking premises? I don't know. Premisi in the Yoker district of Glasgow, and that at one time he had worked in a laboratory. Jean was able to describe distinct facial features of the man, such as him having overlapping front teeth. However, bouncers at the Barrowland Ballroom dismissed a lot of this description, claiming that the man had been a short and well-spoken individual with black hair.
Okay, but
I feel like the one that was in the taxi with him and was there with him for longer kind of would have the better idea.
And had seen his teeth.
Yeah. Anywho, the last possible sighting of the suspect was made by both the driver and conductor on a night service bus, who spotted a young man matching the description given by Jean. The man was the only passenger to get off a bus at the junction of Dumbarton Road and Grey Street at around 2 a.m. on October 31st. He was in quite an untidy state, with mud stains on his jacket and a red mark on his cheek just beneath one eye. Mm-hmm. Both witnesses also recalled his repeatedly tucking a short cuff of one sleeve into his jacket. A man's cufflink had been found by the body of Helen Puttock, so maybe this man was trying to hide the fact that he was missing a cufflink.
Interesting.
Yes.
I think all of that points to a suspect to me.
Yes, it does.
He's got mud stains.
And this man was last seen walking towards the public ferry to cross the River Clyde to the south side of the city. Okay.
I mean, it would make sense that he's not going to murder
in his own very local vicinity,
anywhere near where he lives.
But it could be he still could live in Glasgow and just go into another district. Now, Helen Puttock's murder held exceptional similarities to the two previous murders, raising further suspicions that all three murders had been committed by the same man. As we know, each victim was a mother, met their murderer at the Barrowland Ballroom. Their handbags were missing from the crime scene and each strangled to death, and at least two of the women had been raped prior to the murders, with one of them being inconclusive but likely.
And they were all on their periods.
As well as this, each woman had been escorted home by the killer and murdered within yards of their home. Each victim was menstruating at the time, and each of them had a sanitary towel or tampon placed upon, beneath or near their body.
Weirdo.
Yeah, thus leading to some speculation that the women could have been murdered for refusing to have sex using their period as the reason why they wouldn't.
Oh, that would explain how he knew they were on their periods.
Possibly. Now, within hours of Helen Puttock's body being discovered, another composite drawing of the suspect was made using the detailed description given by Helen's sister Jean. Jean saw the composite images created after the murder of Jemima MacDonald and believed it to be an excellent likeness. Detective Superintendent Joe Beattie asked that the public closely study the composite drawing in case it resembled anybody they may know. The suspect's hairstyle was unfashionable for the time, therefore 450 hairdressers in and around Glasgow were shown the updated drawing of the suspect, and as well as this, all dentists in and around the city were asked to check their records to see if they had any records for a male patient who had overlapping incisors and a missing tooth in the upper right jaw. Unfortunately, neither of these areas of inquiry provided any leads. The police also produced an artist's impression portrait created by Lennox Patterson, registrar of the Glasgow School of Art, based on the recollections of Jean Langford. So, you know, they had quite a lot of drawings and portraits
so
done
they had some idea
based on
what he looked
exactly.
like. Yeah.
Over 100 detectives were assigned full-time to work on the case, and 50,000 witness statements were taken in subsequent door-to-door inquiries. Yeah.
50,000?
Like, that's a
Fucking
lot.
hell.
More than 5,000 potential suspects were questioned in the first year of the inquiry, and Jean Langford had to attend over 300 identity parades.
Jesus Christ.
Or lineups. I prefer the term lineups.
Yeah, I think lineups.
Parades doesn't sound very nice.
No.
It's like parade implies celebration to me.
Yeah. It's not a celebration.
Exactly. However, Jean was adamant that none of the individuals that were in the identity parades or lineups had been the man that she had last seen Helen with. All these individuals were obviously then cleared of any involvement, and fearing the killer would strike again, a team of 16 detectives were tasked to mingle with dancers at all dance halls in Glasgow.
Mingle with dancers.
Mingle. These detectives frequented the Barrowlands on the Barrowland Ballroom on Thursday and Saturday nights at the Over 25s event, which each victim was presumed to have met their murderer at.
Yep.
So it makes sense to make sure to be there for that.
Yeah, for the correct night, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, despite the extensive manhunt, there were no further developments in the case, and the investigation into the three murders started to go cold, with many officers that had been on the case believing that the killer had either been jailed for an unrelated offence, had been incarcerated at a mental hospital, had died, or even that senior police officers knew the killer's identity but had been unable to prove he had committed the murders. Others thought that he could have moved away from the Glasgow area or murdered whenever he was in the area, and that maybe he wasn't from the area. The possibility he had moved or wasn't from the area and only visited prompted the police to circulate copies of the composite drawing at all British Army, Navy and Air Force bases in the UK, Europe, the Middle and Far East. So like they spread that wide.
They covered all bases.
Yeah. However, this potential line of inquiry did not produce any significant leads again, unfortunately. There's a lot of dead ends here.
Yeah.
Hitting walls. Now, then we have potential suspects.
Right.
So, our first one we'll start off here. So, Les Brown, a former detective chief inspector who was working with the Strathclyde police at the time, has supplied current investigators with details of the arrest of a suspect that was conducted in 1969. Les believes that this suspect was very likely to be the killer and was dismissed only because he did not have notably overlapping front teeth.
Okay.
According to Les, the man's arguing with a young woman in the Barrowland Ballroom right before his arrest had raised investigators' concerns, yet this suspect was immediately released from custody, even though he had closely resembled the facial composite and had subsequently given the police a false name and address before eventually revealing his real name and address in the Gorbals. Les said that the fact this suspect did not have notably overlapping front teeth, despite one police sergeant's acknowledgement of this being the best suspect yet, was apparently that the teeth were apparently sufficient for ordering his release.
Okay. What was his name?
The suspect?
Yeah.
So he gave his fake name as John White.
Right.
But I don't think I have a real name, actually.
Oh, maybe it might not be listed.
But he gave the name John White as what he'd given as the fake name.
Right, okay.
But yeah, so apparently the fact that the teeth didn't match the description was enough to release. Which I guess was kind of, because so far all they have is someone who looks a bit like the sketch.
Yeah.
And who happened to be in an argument with a woman the night before his arrest, like earlier before his arrest. But like, people have arguments sometimes.
Yeah, and
doesn't mean they were murdered.
If Jean was dead set that this fella had overlapping teeth and this suspect didn't, then I suppose you would kind of
typically be like, that's a distinct thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, many years later, Les Brown spoke at length to a detective who had taken the same man to a hospital after arresting him outside the Barrowland Ballroom at the time of the murders. The suspect had needed several stitches in his head following an altercation. As soon as his handcuffs were removed, he escaped from the hospital. At the time of this incident, the man had also given a false name to medical personnel, claiming his name to be John White.
Okay, so that is definitely suspicious.
Now, yeah, I found that sus, needing stitches and stuff, and then fleeing from the hospital
Yeah.
before even getting the stitches is what I gather from that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as well as the aforementioned basic circumstantial evidence, the whole demeanour of the man had led Les Brown and many of his colleagues to believe that this man may have been who they were looking for. However, after Les wrote of his suspicions in his 2005 autobiography, that man actually came forward and offered to give a DNA sample to clear his name, and this led to him being eliminated as a suspect.
Okay.
So DNA backed him up by the sounds of things that he wasn't him.
Possible that maybe he was some other kind of criminal and led the
Yeah,
hospital.
or maybe he just thought he was going to get in trouble for
Yeah,
whatever altercation
and
led to the
hospital
stitches, you
from
know.
that, yeah.
So, and then that's the end of that suspect.
Okay.
And as you know, he was cleared, so that's him ruled out. Then we have the next one is an unidentified man contacted the Strathclyde police in 1983, so quite some time later, claiming to know that his friend had been Bible John, adding that both him and his friend had been raised in the Cranhill area of Glasgow, and that they both had frequented the Barrowland Ballroom in the 1960s. He claimed that he had read an article in the Evening Times 5 years previously before suddenly realising his friend had been the killer. The alleged suspect was traced to be living in the Netherlands, married to a Dutch woman, but nothing else was ever heard from the claimant or the supposed suspect.
Okay.
So I don't really know
He never really... Well, it
what
didn't
to make
say
of that, because it didn't say anything to do with them looking into it more or finding anything.
or
So
why he thought his friend was Bible John or anything.
But I'm assuming obviously if they traced him to the Netherlands, they surely got in touch with him.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm assuming that was ruled out maybe. Then moving on, there's a little bit of a clash here,
Okay.
but I'll get to it. I'll point it out when we get to it.
Okay.
In the years following the Bible John killings, many women came forward claiming to have been sexually assaulted after an evening at the Barrowland. One of these women was Hannah Martin. Hannah claimed that she had been assaulted and raped by Bible John and had as a result fallen pregnant and given birth to his child at the Glasgow Royal Maternity Hospital in January of 1970.
Okay.
Hannah gave birth to a girl and initially named her Isabel. Now, I tried to look up, this is who I was trying to look up more on earlier, and I couldn't really see anything.
Couldn't find anything, okay.
Because I was trying to see what it means by initially named the daughter Isabel. Did she give her up for adoption? Did she change the name later? Do you know, that kind of a thing.
Did she do a Kylie Jenner on it?
You know. So in April of 1969, Hannah had gone to the Barrowland and ended up leaving the dance hall with a tall man who she then had sex with. Now this is where I see the clash, because I'm like, that makes it sound consensual to me.
Yeah.
But she said that she was raped. So I'm going to say that that part was rape, but it doesn't really go into much about that.
Okay, yeah.
Hannah had accepted his offer of a lift home. However, during the drive, the man's sexual demeanour became more aggressive. Hannah was drunk and terrified that she may get attacked and vomited in the man's car. The man then bundled her out of the car and drove off, leaving her stranded on the pavement. Now, David Leslie, an author, has claimed that Hannah's daughter could be the one indisputable link to the identity of Bible John. And if
that is true,
if it was, you know, like, it could have been someone else that raped her.
At the end of the day, was there anything said about DNA taken from the victims' bodies, like the murder victims?
Semen.
Oh, so they did get DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they could test the daughter, or they could test Isabel's DNA against that DNA.
Yeah.
And at least then they would be able to...
But then, again, where it says initially named her Isabel, I'm assuming that maybe she was given up for adoption.
Yeah.
In the sense that, would it not be, if she was still with this Hannah Martin, would it not be really easy to track the Isabel down and get the DNA to just run that test? So I'm assuming it's a case of maybe... now this is... what's the word? Hearsay, what I'm saying is hearsay. Conjecture. Is that the right word? That's what I was going to say.
I think so.
But basically what I'm saying is not fact, it's just a theory. So my theory would be that maybe she gave her up for adoption and it could have been a closed adoption, and for some reason they couldn't unlock it.
Can't find her.
And they can't find her to do that. But I'm assuming given the circumstances it would be okay that you'd be able to open those records. But it depends, I guess. Every case is different.
No, I think it would depend on the law of...
I feel like because when it comes to murders,
Scotland,
that the majority of countries allow it to be opened only for the viewing of the police.
Yeah, like they wouldn't be
only for official
making it
viewing.
Public to the mother
yeah,
or
exactly.
Anything. It would be for investigative
But
reasons.
so I'm just surprised there's not more on that possible link, the biological link, if that is the daughter of Bible John. But then they could track him down, and unless they have evidence, it could just be a rapist.
Imagine how awful
Not Bible John.
it would be for that girl if they did track her down, they tested her DNA, and she had to find out that, like, well, I'm assuming
If she didn't know,
if
yeah.
she didn't know she was adopted,
which-
she has to find out she's adopted and that her biological father is
a serial killing
and
rapist.
potentially a serial killer.
Yeah. And if it wasn't Bible John that's her father, either way, it's either a rapist
yeah.
or your
And
mother
like, even
is...
if she knows she's adopted, that's still a very heavy thing to find out.
Yeah, so like it's either your father's a rapist, your father's a serial killer and a rapist, or your mother's a liar.
Yeah.
Which obviously, just for the record, I would believe it.
Yeah, like
I'm just saying
we're
that,
not discrediting
yes,
her saying
that
she
is
was raped
just,
at all.
of course, always an awful possibility.
Yeah.
But, you know, either way, regardless of what way she found out and what came of it, it's like ground shattering for them.
Absolutely. Like, I can't even imagine.
And that's it on that kind of little part. There wasn't too much there. Now, in 1996, Strathclyde police exhumed the body of John Irvin McInnes from a graveyard in Stonehouse, South Lanarkshire. John, who had served in the Scots Guards, had committed suicide at the age of 41 in 1980. John was the cousin of one of the original suspects in the Bible John investigation, and so a DNA sample was taken from the body of John for comparison with semen samples found on Helen Puttock's stockings, the same stockings that were used to strangle Helen. The test results conducted, unfortunately, came back inconclusive, so, you know,
It's
not for or
not
against.
A yes or a no.
Yeah, with then Lord Advocate Lord Mackay stating insufficient evidence existed to link John with the murder of Helen Puttock, and the Crown officially cleared John of playing any part in the Bible John murders in July 1996. Which I suppose good for, if there's any living family of this person, good for that, because to be get cleared of it, because you know, they're dead, they can't defend themselves or own up. And that's all on that suspect.
Okay.
Now, here, as mentioned earlier, Peter Tobin, we're on to him. This is quite a lengthy one. Now, it has been speculated by many criminologists and investigators that the convicted serial killer, Peter Tobin, may have been Bible John. Peter Tobin was convicted in May of 2007 of the 2006 murder of Polish student Angelika Kluck, who had been raped, beaten and then stabbed to death. Peter had relocated from Shettleston, Glasgow, to England in August of 1969, prior to the final two murders committed by Bible John, after marrying his first wife, who he had met at the Barrowland Ballroom in 1968.
Interesting.
So then, from August 1969, Peter lived in Brighton for 20 years, and from the late 1980s, he would alternately reside in either Scotland or South England. The fact Peter Tobin had attacked Angelika Kluck so viciously, hid her body and then fled to London before his arrest did not suggest the work of an amateur. In addition to that, the methods of violence used towards two 1991 victims that actually ended up being unearthed from his Margate Homes garden.
So he had
more victims.
Oh my god, he just
buried them in his garden. And then obviously they were able to tell about the kind of violence used on those victims as well as the Angelika victim. However, one inconsistency is that Bible John displayed his victim's body in public places, whereas Peter Tobin buried all of his known victims.
And also Peter Tobin stabbed Angelika, whereas Bible John
Exactly.
strangled his victims.
And then as well, if you were to go by the thing, he was not supposedly in Scotland for the last two Bible Johns, so he would have only been around for the first one.
Quite a lot of inconsistency
there. Now, some contemporary visual similarities do exist between Peter Tobin when he was in his 20s and the 1969 composite drawing of Bible John. However, the composite drawing showed Bible John having red hair, and contemporary pictures of Peter show that he did not have this hair colour. So, you know, not the same, not matching completely on that. All three of Peter's former wives had given accounts of being repeatedly imprisoned, beaten and raped by him. Each of them also stated Peter had been driven to extreme physical violence by the female menstrual cycle.
Wasn't a fan of the period.
And neither was Bible John, it seemed, or was a fan of getting rejected because of the period, one or the other. In addition, Peter is also known to have been a devout Roman Catholic with strong religious views, and the alias Bible John gave to Jean Langford and Helen Puttock in 1969 is similar to one of the pseudonyms that Peter was known to have used regularly, John Semple. and one of the synonyms was John Simpleton.
Yeah, she wasn't sure if it was
Templeton or something like that.
Not Eccleston.
Something anyway along the lines. They were very all
Yeah.
But this was John Semple, and she had said that John Simpleton was one of the ones given. So that's a bit sus.
Very suspicious.
David Wilson, a criminologist, actively investigated Peter Tobin's case for 3 years and strongly believes the available evidence supports his theory that Peter Tobin is Bible John. David has stated that the moment he believed Peter was Bible John happened during Peter's trial for the 1991 murder of 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, one of the women whose bodies had been found in his Margate garden. Mm-hmm. David also uses circumstantial evidence to support his theory, such as the striking similarities between trial testimony from an acquaintance of Dinah McNichol's, who had been in her company on the evening that Dinah was abducted, and the conversation that Jean Langford claimed to have had with Bible John on the evening of her sister Helen's murder.
Okay.
Now, among the important points of overlap are both men mentioning they don't drink at Hogmanay, which is like it's like Scottish New Year.
Okay.
From what I remember, because I didn't write it down, but I'm sure it's like a Scottish New Year type of thing.
Okay.
And having a cousin who had once scored a hole-in-one in a golf match. Because that's important.
That's so specific.
Isn't it? Now, this information, as well as other circumstantial evidence, had led Professor David Wilson to state, quote, "I didn't set out to prove Peter Tobin," well, Tobin he just said, "was Bible John, but I would stake my professional reputation on it," unquote. Even though DNA testing has been used to clear multiple suspects, detectives believe obtaining a forensic link between Peter Tobin and any of the murder victims linked to Bible John is unlikely due to the deterioration of the physical samples due to poor storage.
Typical.
Like, really?
Fucking typical.
And that's all on the Peter Tobin side of things in there anyway. Well, not all, actually. I tell a lie, we've got much more. That was bullshit.
Okay.
Now, a police investigation that was initiated in 2006 called Operation Anagram to trace the movements of Peter Tobin throughout the decades and to determine his potential culpability in any other crimes. A woman informed the investigators she had been raped by Peter Tobin after she had met him at the Barrowland Ballroom in 1968, not long after the first murder was known to have been committed by Bible John. So, Peter Tobin has been ruled out as a suspect by police, although it is often reported that Peter had moved from Glasgow to Brighton after the 1969 murders. I think it was commonly reported that he moved from Glasgow to London after the 1969 murders, but he actually relocated to Brighton with his fiancée.
Okay.
Now, his fiancée was Margaret Mountney, before the second murder that was attributed to Bible John. So, as far as they know, he was not even in Scotland when the second murder that was credited to Bible John. Yeah, exactly. So, it's like, how could it be him?
Yeah.
Operation Anagram uncovered that Peter was in Brighton at the time of the final two Bible John murders, so Jemima and Helen. Peter had married his first wife in Brighton on the 6th of August 1969, 10 days prior to the murder of Jemima MacDonald on August 16th. And that date, the date of the marriage, is recorded on the marriage certificate.
Yeah.
Peter's wife also testified that they were still on their honeymoon in Brighton at the time. The second victim was murdered, and she insists Peter was with her at the time. Peter Tobin was in police custody for an unrelated crime when another one of the killings took place. And he was also still living in Brighton at the time of the third murder, meaning that had it have been him, he would have had to travel without his wife knowing to Glasgow and back from Brighton to have committed the murder of Helen Puttock. So, like, there's a lot of inconsistencies there between being in the police station for something else, being with your wife, being on honeymoon, getting married, you know, those kind of things.
Like, the thing is, I think
he's a piece of shit that has done a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
But I don't think he's Bible John.
And I do think he fits the Bible John description in certain ways, but the fact that there is no physical way for him to have committed the murders does unfortunately rule him out.
Yeah. So it doesn't seem likely. Now, Peter Tobin's DNA was checked against a semen sample for Bible John as part of Operation Anagram. The results of this test conclusively proved that the bodily fluid was not from Peter Tobin.
Right, so it wasn't inconclusive, it was conclusive.
Exactly.
They can definitively say it was not him.
Now, the doubts surrounding the DNA evidence notwithstanding, the police also have a record of the bite mark the killer left on Helen Puttock's body.
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah, which they can cross-check with Peter's dental records, as had been done with the police when the police exhumed and eliminated John McInes as a suspect in 1996. The senior investigating officer in charge of Operation Anagram, David Swindle, has stated that there is no evidence to link Peter Tobin to the Bible John murders, and Operation Anagram eventually discounted the theory. David had previously presided over the 2002 review of the Bible John murders, 4 years prior to the initial discoveries of Peter Tobin's murders. Although Professor David Wilson, as we'd mentioned previously, had claimed in his... Oh wait, no. Did we mention him yet? I don't know. But anyway, Professor David Wilson had claimed in his 2010 book, The Lost British Serial Killer, that Bible John was Peter Tobin. Yeah, we did mention him. His co-writer for the book, Paul Harrison, later recanted on the claims they made in the book. And in 2013, Harrison published a new book instead, claiming Bible John was a police officer.
Possible.
Possible.
Very possible.
There was something I was going to say, and I can't remember what it was, but it was to do with Peter Tobin.
I don't know.
Oh yes, another kind of thing that I suppose you could theorise is, because remember, I don't think there was a semen sample at the first one.
Okay.
I think the main semen sample was found with Helen Puttock. Like another theory you could say is that maybe Peter Tobin killed the first victim.
Yeah.
And then the other two were just copycatted the same. Copycat what was on to the first one and stuck to the same area to kind of cover their arse, or attempt to cover their arse.
It's strange that the murderer committed, we'll say, 2 to 3 murders and then just
disappeared.
Yeah,
very weird.
Never killed again. As far as we know.
Exactly, which is why they kind of, I suppose, think maybe incarcerated for something else, or mentally, institutionalised
or maybe
dead.
They died, yeah.
Do you know? Then our final bit on this case is, I suppose, a bit of aftermath. No further murder victims killed in Scotland or even elsewhere in the UK have ever been conclusively attributed to Bible John, and the manhunt for this murderer was one of the most extensive manhunts in Scottish criminal history. The murders of the 3 women, Patricia Docker, Jemima MacDonald and Helen Puttock, are sadly unsolved to this day. However, the case does remain open, with many investigators remaining certain that the killer or killers were very likely to have been protected by one or more individuals they or he had known. Not everyone agrees that the 3 killings were the work of the same person.
Yeah.
Like I said, you've got that copycat theory. Maybe the first one was someone else and the other 2 were like just someone getting in on it.
Because you do get that.
Yeah, and it has been pointed out by some, while not always, but that the gap of 18 months between the first 2 killings is unusual for a serial killer.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but between the first 2 killings, it's very strange. You might get someone who commits loads and then might have a cool down period for a while, or might try and go live a normal life for a few years and then be like, nah, and then go back to it.
Murdering.
But between the first 2, I find that very strange. And then to stop after 3 that we know of, even weirder.
Weird.
Which is where, I suppose, and that later killings, could have been a copycat. That's kind of where that comes from, the timing.
Yeah.
And the police have also received criticism for potentially hindering their own investigation by prematurely jumping to conclusion that all 3 murders had been committed by the same person. Now, I don't know how to feel about that statement. I'm neither here nor there, because from what I gather at the start, they were, in my opinion, unless maybe it just, when you're reading it on paper, maybe it seems like it took a while when it didn't take that long. But it seemed like they were slower than some cases to jump on that it was the same person bandwagon.
Yeah, and I will say, like, in a lot of cases...
I'd be the first to say I think the police fucked up, but I
thought
they waited a while.
In a lot of cases, you would see a poor investigative work, but I think in this one, they did do quite a lot. And,
I feel like it's not very harmful to, think that you could be looking at a serial killer here and that they're all the same, as long as you also keep yourself open-minded enough to be aware that it could be different people, so that when you're looking at a crime scene you can be like, okay, does this look like the work of a serial killer or an individual?
Yeah, and like I will say, I don't think that they boxed themselves off at all into
No,
this
so-
is just one person or this is multiple people. They waited a bit before they came to the conclusion.
The evidence spoke for itself. Like, it did seem
they
like the
followed,
work
they
of a
did follow
serial
the
killer.
evidence. They followed the evidence. I will say that.
So then in 2004, police announced their intentions to genetically test several men in a further attempt to identify the killer, with all individuals concerned being requested to submit blood samples. This endeavour followed the previous discovery of an 80% genetic match from the semen samples retrieved from the final crime scene attributed to Bible John, with a DNA sample retrieved at the site of a minor crime committed 2 years prior.
Okay.
The sample was enough of a match to lead officers to believe that the person who committed the offence was related to the killer.
Okay, I suppose 80% match, it wouldn't be the person themselves, but it
Yeah,
could be someone related. Like
exactly.
cousin,
Like, that's a
brother,
very,
nephew,
very close match. Now, Jean Langford,
Helen Puttock's sister.
yes, the only witness to have engaged in a lengthy conversation with Bible John, sadly died in September of 2010 at 74 years of age. Jean had, as we know, given the police the description used to form the second composite drawing created of the suspect, which continues to remain the most significant clue as to the physical appearance of the killer. Jean Langford discussed her sister's murderer many years later, and she herself dismissed Professor Wilson's theory that Peter Tobin had been the man with whom she had shared a taxi with on the night of her sister's murder.
And I do feel like she would know.
Yeah. And that concludes the case of Bible John.
I like how we both did unsolved cases 1 week, 2 weeks in a row. Nice.
Yeah, we just recorded them on the one day.
Yeah, just on the one day. So I
back
promise
to back.
this will not end with me butchering Shéna Fianna Fáil, Aran Navian. My apologies. Jesus Christ. I'm currently trying to look up the composite sketch for Bible John, but my internet is shit.
I think I have it saved anyway, so I can show it to you in a second.
I would like to see.
So yes, that concludes Bible John.
As always, thanks for listening.
Exactly. Thank you very much for listening. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or any podcasting platform you're on that lets you give us stars and reviews and those lovely nice things.
And if we're in your Spotify Wrapped, please let us know.
Oh yes, if we're in your Spotify Wrapped, because someone, a couple of people have sent me their Spotify Wrapped and we're in their top 5 on the shows they listen to. So if you have your Spotify Wrapped and we're in yours, find us on Instagram, Twisted Talks the Pod, and send us a little screenshot. We appreciate you. And oh, you got it.
I got it, but I'm also getting a phone call, so 1 second. Oh, he's gone. Okay.
Anywho,
that is a very detailed.
It is, isn't it?
Very detailed composite.
Like, very well done. And I will put the sketches, drawings.
Is that?
That must be a modernised one, is it? Or is that the art one that was done?
I don't know, but
But we will put them on the Instagram the day this goes up.
I feel bad for saying this, but he's cute.
Tanya, well, actually, I can't give out. I said the same thing.
We
about
all love a bad boy.
Not a fucking
murderer,
terrorist,
though, Janice. Yeah. That one though, he's not so cute. No.
That one, he looks like he's gone living with Sonny Bean. That's why we can't find him.
He's one of Sonny Bean's. He's a descendant of Sonny Bean. We've cracked it.
No.
We have cracked.
That's why they can't be found.
They
run back to the cave. Maybe they found a new cave. I don't know. But anyway, once again, thanks millions for listening. When is this episode coming out, actually?
I don't fucking know.
I'm like, is it time to start saying Happy Christmas yet?
Oh, Jesus. Not like on a date.
No, I don't think it is. No, we've got some time. We've got another 1 or 2 episodes before we have to do that. So, yes. Next week, we have no idea what we're doing yet, but it's going to be a joint case.
Yes.
So be there or be square because you're not around.
You're so funny.
Okay, right, for the 1 millionth and 10th time.
Love ya.
Love you all.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. 5-star reviews. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all the good things. We're on YouTube as well, although I'm a bit behind with uploading the episodes.
Class.
But
we're so cool.
Yes, much love.
Bye.
Hasta la pasta. Ciao.